in the soft embrace of ancient dawn, when the rivers of China still whispered secrets to the bamboo, and the wind moved gently across silk-scented groves, there lived a woman whose name would thread itself through millennia, not through war or decree, but through the shimmer of fabric that would one day stretch from royal palaces to the farthest corners of the earth. Her name was Xi Ling Shi, and though the world would come to call her a myth, her legend has endured with the serene dignity of a silkworm spinning its cocoon, quiet, deliberate, and utterly transformative. She was, as stories go, an empress, but unlike the figures who have loomed large in conquest or court intrigue, Xi Ling Shi stands apart. Not because she conquered nations, but because she unraveled a thread that stitched civilization closer together. She was the wife of the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, a man often mythologized as the founding father of Chinese civilization, a ruler whose presence is as much philosophical as historical. But within his shadow stood this woman, cloaked not in armor, but in a curiosity so profound it birthed one of humanity's most treasured inventions. The world of Empress Xi Ling Shi was one of ordered ritual, celestial balance, and imperial restraint. Hers was a time where harmony was valued above all, and where the court moved with the grace of poetry read aloud. In this realm of decorum and hierarchy, the Empress could have contented herself with embroidery and etiquette, but nature, as it often does, intervened. And one day, beneath a mulberry tree with teacup in hand and the hush of courtly life rustling gently around her, she watched something unusual fall into her cup, a cocoon, soft and pearlescent, a capsule of mystery that floated delicately upon the surface of the hot water. Instead of discarding it with a frown, or instructing a servant to fetch a fresh cup, Xi Ling Shi peered into the swirling steam and noticed the cocoon begin to unravel. The heat loosened its threads, revealing a single, continuous filament of remarkable strength and softness. And in that moment her gaze shifted not merely to the thread, but to the possibilities it contained. With quiet resolve and the patience only those attuned to nature possess, she pulled that thread, feeling the texture slip across her fingers. It was unlike anything she had touched before. Thus began her journey, not as a conqueror, but as an observer. As the silkworms spun their secrets into cocoons, Xi Ling Shi began to study them, to chart their habits, their diet, their life cycles. She discovered that they fed exclusively on mulberry leaves, and that their lives, brief though they were, offered a miraculous product, if only one had the wisdom to see it. It was she who domesticated the worms, tending them with care and developing a method of harvesting their silk before metamorphosis could ruin the filament. She invented the reel, the loom, the process of spinning the silk into usable thread. In the quietude of her private chambers, she birthed a revolution, one cocoon at a time. Soon, under her supervision, the art of sericulture blossomed. It was no longer an experiment, but a discipline, a secret craft known only to those within the palace walls. The silk they produced shimmered like water under moonlight, light yet warm, smooth as breath, strong as memory. Word of it spread through the court like a hush before a performance. The nobility wore it first, robes dyed in imperial yellow, embroidered with dragons, flowing like whispers through palace corridors. The artisans and servants watched in awe, but none dared speak of it outside the palace gates. And so China's greatest secret was born, not in a laboratory or on a battlefield, but in a garden by a woman who saw possibility where others might have seen inconvenience. This was not just thread, it was transformation. It was innovation in its purest form, woven through patience and insight. Xi Ling Shi didn't simply create a textile, she created a symbol, one that would represent luxury, refinement, mystery, and ingenuity for thousands of years. With the rise of silk came the rise of influence. The cloth became a currency of culture. Traders whispered of its softness in markets far beyond China's borders. As centuries passed, caravans would follow what came to be known as the Silk Road, winding through deserts and mountains, linking east to west not through conquest, but through commerce and curiosity. But even as the silk spread, the source remained cloaked in secrecy. No one outside the empire was permitted to know the origin of this marvel. Those who dared to smuggle silkworms or mulberry seeds faced severe punishment. The empire protected its treasure with a quiet ferocity, and the legend of Xi Ling Shi grew ever more revered. She was honored not merely as an empress, but as the goddess of silk, her name invoked in rituals of weaving and harvesting for generations. Women who worked the looms prayed to her, not in fear, but in gratitude, for it was she who had lifted their labor from mere necessity to sacred tradition. And as dynasties rose and fell, her image endured, painted onto scrolls, whispered in stories, etched into the memory of a culture that never forgot the touch of silk against the skin, or the woman who first imagined it. But of course, time does what time does best. It smooths the edges of history, blurring fact and fable into something softer and perhaps more meaningful. Did Xi Ling Shi truly discover silk by accident, or was it the cumulative wisdom of generations distilled into one story? Historians debate, as historians tend to do. But within China, and for many who trace their ancestry through the lands once ruled by the Yellow Emperor, her story is not treated as a footnote. It is taught as heritage. It is embraced as truth, not because it can be verified in a lab, but because it reflects the spirit of ingenuity and reverence that defines a civilization. And therein lies the brilliance of Empress Xi Ling Shi's legacy. Whether seated firmly in history or balanced on the edge of myth, her tale continues to inspire. In every thread of silk, there lingers the echo of her curiosity. In every bolt of shimmering fabric, the trace of her wisdom. She represents not only the birth of an industry, but the emergence of a principle that even within the confines of tradition, innovation can flourish, so long as one is willing to look closely, to listen deeply, and to learn from the smallest of creatures. She stands not as an ornament of history, but as a thread through it, a quiet, steady line connecting past to present, east to west, the intimate to the infinite. And even now, in the modern world of synthetic fibers and machine looms, silk remains different. It breathes, it remembers, it respects its origin. In the temples of sericulture, her name is spoken with a solemnity reserved for those who changed the world not by force, but by fiber. She reminds us that greatness need not be loud, that discovery does not demand domination. Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with a battle cry, but with a teacup, a falling cocoon, and a woman who chose to notice. Generations passed, and with them the faces of emperors and dynasties, each leaving behind a trail of decrees, temples, and tombs. Yet the thread of Empress Xi Ling Shi endured, quite literally, as it wove its way through the fabric of empires. Her influence seeped into daily life so seamlessly that it became invisible. Present in the gowns of royalty, the scrolls of scholars, the banners of armies, and the robes of monks. The softness of silk was matched only by the strength of the empire's grip on its secret, and at the heart of it all, whether spoken or left unspoken, was the empress beneath the mulberry tree, the first to see treasure in the ordinary. As silk became a staple of Chinese identity, its production transformed from an intimate curiosity into an industry of both pride and power. Women across the empire, especially in the countryside, took on the role once held by Xi Ling Shi. They nurtured the silkworms, plucked the leaves, boiled the cocoons, and spun the threads. It was work that tied them, generation after generation, to the empress who had shown that a woman's hands could shape the destiny of nations. In this way, she became more than a cultural figure. She became a symbol of wisdom passed down through maternal lines, her legacy spun and respun on the looms of tradition. And yet, despite the vastness of the silk industry, the original story remained small and tender. It was retold not as state propaganda or imperial decree, but as something closer to a fireside tale. It wasn't shouted, it was whispered, often by mothers to daughters, or by aged weavers to apprentices. The reverence given to Xi Ling Shi had little to do with divine worship and everything to do with intimate admiration. She was not invoked to grant fortune or fertility. She was honored because she had seen something no one else had seen and had cared enough to follow that vision gently but completely. Meanwhile, in distant lands, the silk itself began to stir envy and awe. Along the rugged arteries of what would become the Silk Road, foreign merchants caught glimpses of this miracle cloth and began to speculate. Where did it come from? Who made it? How could it be so strong, yet so light? Rome, Persia, Byzantium all tried to uncover the mystery, often crediting their own gods or sorcerers for its existence. But no matter how far the silk traveled, the secret of its source remained hidden within China's borders. It was a secret protected with quiet vigilance, a testament to how much the nation valued the gift of Xi Ling Shi. Some tried to steal it, of course. There are stories, semi-legendary, semi-true, of monks smuggling silkworm eggs in hollowed-out walking sticks, or concubines sewing them into their hems before being sent to foreign courts. And when eventually the secret did begin to leak beyond the empire's grasp, it was not viewed as a failure of security, but simply the natural unraveling of a tightly held thread. By that time, the world had already been transformed. The credit, in the eyes of the Chinese people, remained with the woman who started it all. What makes the story of Xi Ling Shi so enduring is not just the silk, but the nature of her discovery. Her tale is not filled with thunderclaps or divine interventions. It is built on subtlety, a woman pausing to observe, to wonder, and then to act with care and consistency. She didn't demand reverence, she earned it. She didn't claim power, she cultivated it. And the result was a legacy that outlived not only her own dynasty, but many civilizations that would later rise and fall. In traditional art, she is sometimes depicted seated calmly, surrounded by mulberry leaves and silkworms, her fingers gracefully engaged in the act of reeling. The images are not loud or triumphant. They are serene, befitting someone who found revolution in the folds of contemplation. Her presence is not dramatic, but dignified, and perhaps that's why she has never faded. People do not grow tired of hearing about her because her story does not demand belief. It merely invites reflection. In the centuries that followed, silk became more than fabric. It became a diplomatic tool, a religious garment, a military flag, and a symbol of dynastic stability. Buddhist monks wrapped themselves in it as they traveled the same roads the traders walked, their soft robes catching the light like portable shrines. Aristocrats used it as a sign of refinement, scholars as a medium for painting and calligraphy, and poets as a metaphor for grace, beauty, and impermanence. And in each of those uses, the legacy of Xi Ling Shi flickered gently, like a candle that refuses to be snuffed out. As China evolved, so did its understanding of its own past. Emperors who claimed descent from Huangdi would often cite Xi Ling Shi as a paragon of feminine virtue, not only obedient and wise, but inventive and unshakably calm. Confucian scholars wrote of her not just in praise of her discovery, but as a model of balanced conduct, industrious without arrogance, intelligent without ostentation, and always aligned with the natural order of things. Even as the formal histories of the dynasties shifted to male perspectives and military milestones, the Empress of Silk remained a quiet but unmovable figure in the cultural subconscious. In modern China, her story continues to hold relevance. Museums devoted to sericulture display her likeness. Schools include her tale in textbooks, not merely as a myth to be dissected, but as a cultural inheritance to be understood. Fashion designers invoke her in speeches and on runways, celebrating how something as ancient as her silk continues to find new expression in the 21st century. And though factories may now produce silk by the ton, the reverence for the origin remains. The mulberry trees are still grown, the silkworms still fed and cared for. The process, though industrialized, retains its ancestral heartbeat. Outside of China, the name Xi Ling Shi may be less well known, but the impact of her work is undeniable. Every time silk is worn on a runway, hung in a gallery, or gifted in ceremonial dress, it echoes back to her. Every smooth ribbon, every shimmering scarf, every elegant robe, they all carry a fragment of her discovery. She is proof that civilization does not only move forward through upheaval. Sometimes it advances through attention, through quiet revelation and enduring stewardship. And this is perhaps her greatest lesson, that dignity need not come from status. That influence does not require spectacle. That one act of quiet observation, when followed by persistence and care, can reach farther than any army. She did not need to rule loudly, she merely needed to notice, to nurture, and to teach. In every culture, we seek origin stories. We want to know where things came from, who began them, and why. These stories help us understand not just the objects in our lives, but the values we hold dear. Xi Ling Shi's story offers not just an origin for silk, but a reminder of what lies within discovery, attention, grace, and patience. Whether she lived exactly as the stories say is almost beside the point. What matters is what she represents, a culture that prized harmony with nature, respect for craft, and the power of a single, steady hand to shape the world. And so, the woman beneath the mulberry tree continues to spin her legacy, not from silk alone, but from memory, reverence, and enduring admiration. Her thread remains unbroken. And that's the end of this story. Thanks for watching and for making it all the way through. Until next time, take care.